Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Pink Floyd Completion Project. Today, we are taking a look at what was for 20 years the final Pink Floyd studio album, The Division Bell. I'm going to tell you right now, I've listened to this album enough times that I do not need to take notes for it. It is genuinely great. So after, momentary lapse of reason, and that whole big tour and a whole lot of stuff, the Floyd kind of went on break for a little while. Nobody, outside of Roger Waters, nobody from the band released any solo material. And everybody just kind of hung out for a little bit. And then in 1993, they reunited at Britannia Row and started doing some jam sessions. And this time from the start, Rick Wright was involved and Nick Mason was involved. Guy Pratt kind of came into the studio a bit later on. But the three-piece Floyd, they went to Britannia Row, and to get ideas going, they started jamming. And does this album sound like it? Yes, this album was released in 1994, but would I strictly say it sounds like the 70s? Not necessarily, but it has aged just as well as most of that material. It is genuinely great. Does it sound like it came out in the 90s? Not really. The Floyd did take inspiration from some of the music that was going on at the time, but this is 1993 and 1994. This is the era of grunge. They did not take inspiration from grunge. I don't think I want to hear Pink Floyd take on a grunge album. I think David Gilmour has too much talent for that. But, once again, it had an album cover designed by Storm Thorgerson. And for additional personnel for the saxophone solo on Wearing the Inside Out, Dick Perry made his return, and Michael Kamen returned to do the orchestrations. Again, it's kind of like a who's who of who's worked with the Floyd before. It's another Floyd album. That's kind of how I would describe it. But that doesn't mean it's any lesser quality of their golden age stuff from the 70s. And it's certainly better than anything Roger was making. But to start off, the concept of the album, actually, this is a concept album, but not even really in the way of their last several concept albums. It's not a big, long rock opera like The Wall. It's not two concepts fighting for each other, like on the final cut, and it's not really a generalized thing about the modern world like Dark Side of the Moon or something against the record industry like Wish You Were Here. This album focuses on communication and the failures and achievements of that. And I'm going to tell you what, yes, it's a bit of a looser concept. It's not as firm as even Dark Side of the Moon, which is their most broad-reaching album. But it is pretty damn concrete. That being said, and this album, it does have some of those Floyd hallmarks, guitar solos from David Gilmour being a god, and, one track fading into the next. But I would say this is, for me at least, this is the most playlistable Pink Floyd album. It works just as well on shuffle mode, to a degree. There's some songs that just should be played at the start and at the end, right? This album almost works as well on shuffle mode as it does normally. It is the most playlistable Pink Floyd album, in my opinion. So starting off, Cluster 1, an instrumental. And it starts off with, noises that are recorded from the sun and then sped up, I think. That's what it's called. And then in comes Rick's keyboard. And Dave starts feeding off of it. And for the vast majority of the song until there's about 50 seconds left in it, it's just David and Rick jamming. Sorry about the wind. but it is just David Gilmour and Rick Wright jamming and feeding off of each other. Something we haven't heard to any substantial degree since Wish You Were Here. 19 years and we haven't heard this. And I'm going to tell you what, it still works, and they haven't lost any musical chemistry. In fact, it's grown. It might be even stronger since they've spent so much time apart. And then Nick comes in with the drums, and Pink Floyd really does feel like a band again. It's not buried under a bunch of 80s shit. It doesn't feel like a bunch of stuff was added later on. This is fly on the wall, in the studio, just listening to these three dudes who have known each other for almost 30 years jam out together. And it's beautiful. And then that's followed by What Do You Want From Me? A song which is, if you ask Dave, it's kind of about, his relationship with, his then girlfriend and now wife, Polly Sampson, who wrote many of the lyrics on this album. Now, just because a woman wrote the lyrics, does that mean they're worse? Fuck no! They're not as good as some of Roger's stuff, but they're better than a lot of the stuff we're going to hear from him later on. Oh, just you wait. Just you wait. Again, sorry about the wind and changing lighting conditions. I'm kind of on a time crunch. But What Do You Want From Me? To me, this is very clearly about Dave and Roger, specifically during the final cut. And it's so fucking good. Dave's entrance guitar solo is fucking great. And he's yelling and screaming like, hey, what do you want from me? And it could be interpreted as this old grizzled rock star who kind of wants to retire, but his fan base just wants him to keep going, and he does it for the fans, but he's just like, there's only so much of this shit I can give you, man. And Rick and Dave harmonize on the bridge. It's glorious. You could have anything you want. Sell your soul for complete control. Is that really what you need? It's so good, and it's the first time we've heard it with any clarity on a studio album since Dark Side of the Moon. And it's 21 years since we've heard that with clarity. And it's so good, dude. I can't describe that any better than I have. It's so fucking good. And then that travels into Pulls Apart, which is, a more acoustic number. It's a bit longer. It's the second longest on the album. It clips just over 7.5 minutes. But it's great. There's a church organ solo in the middle. Rick does some great stuff on the synth. Dave's vocals are great. And, it's sort of half about Syd Barrett and his issues. I never thought that you'd lose that light in your eyes. And then it's halfway about Roger Waters. Hey you, did you ever realize what you'd become? And again, it's like, it kind of starts solidifying this as this is going to be the last thing the Floyd does in the studio, at the very least for a long time. I'm sorry that the wind is so fucking loud, dude. Oh my goodness. But again, it's just so good. It kind of solidifies that this is going to be the last thing the Floyd does in the studio. There is kind of an air of finality to this album. But it's not like the Floyd is phoning it in either. And it's great. It's great. It's talking about the tragedy of Syd Barrett and the ego of Roger Waters. And once again, tapping into that communication and adding to that air of finality. And then song number 4, Marooned, the second of 2 instrumentals. This is the only thing the Floyd ever won a Grammy for. It kind of deserves it because it's so fucking good. It's so good. Once again, Dave and Rick playing off of each other. And Guy Pratt, I didn't notice this until this most recent listen today. Guy Pratt does play some decent bass during the second half of the song. I didn't even realize there was bass on the song until today. And it's so good. Once again, kind of like Dark Side of the Moon, you notice something a little bit different with this album every time you listen to it. And it's great. Dave's guitar is great. Nick's drumming is great. Rick's keys are great. Everything about it is great. It's so fucking good. Oh, and then that segues into the song with the most Roger lyrics on the album, A Great Day for Freedom, which is about the fall of the Berlin Wall. Roger kind of celebrated it in his own way, so the Floyd's kind of like, yeah, we should probably do something with it. I don't think that's why the song was written. But again, the Berlin, talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the failure of communication between countries, between the two halves of the world during the Cold War. Now life devalues day by day as friends and neighbors turn away. And there's change that even with regret cannot be undone. Now frontiers shift like desert sands, while nations wash their bloody hands of loyalty, of history, of shades of gray. Now the two halves of the world can communicate again, and countries can go back to being their own thing and not part of the Soviet Union. It truly is an uplifting song. I really, really love it, and it does act. We're clear. We were firmly in the era of CDs at this point, but it does act as a spiritual closer to side one, because the next song doesn't transition into the next song, which is Wearing the Inside Out, and it's got and this is actually the only Pink Floyd song to have a writing credit from Guy Pratt. He did something with, however his bass pedals were set up, and he did something wacky with it, and the Floyd were like, that's really fucking cool, we're using that. So it sort of becomes the core of the piece. It has, it begins with a sax solo from Dick Perry. Again, saxophones returning. Not like the saxophone was kind of a big thing in the 80s, but here it definitely feels like a distinctly Floyd thing. But saxophones coming back, played by Dick Perry, the man who played on both Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. It kind of adds to that air of finality. And also adding to that air of finality, for the first time since Time on Dark Side of the Moon, 21 years earlier, Rick Wright takes a lead vocal. And it sounds great. And it was done in one take. One take. That's amazing. For somebody who hadn't sung on an album since what? His fucking 1978 with his solo out with his debut solo album. It's beautiful. One take. Wearing the and it's talking about basically being in a state of depression. And that theme does kind of carry over into Rick's solo album, which we'll look at after this one. Well, not directly after this one. So it does kind of carry over into that. But, again, it's great. It's so good. Dave's guitar is excellent. Nick's drums are excellent. Guy's bass is excellent. And Dave sings a little bit on this song as well. It's kind of like coming back with Time. Like, you know, it's beautiful. Beautiful. You know, and then this one's kind of on its own. It's in a weird place on the album. It's like that midpoint. And then we come into Take It Back, which is a song, you know, about Earth, climate change shit. Again, this was before Al Gore made, you know, everybody, you know, make you freak out about it. And then the science came back going like, hey, this is a bit bullshit. So, you know, but, you know, it's fine. It's great musically. It's the one thing that doesn't really fit the concept of the album, but I'm not going to disparage it. If it could stop being so fucking windy, that would be fan-fucking-tastic. So, you know, it's good. It kind of has single energy, and it was one of the singles for the album, so I'm not going to, you know, blame it. It's the closest in spirit to Momentary Lapse of Reason, but, you know, again, it's aged better than Momentary Lapse of Reason. Dave's vocals are great. It's alright. And then we come into Coming Back to Life. A beautiful song with, you know, a very sparse intro musically, but Dave's vocals are so rich. It's borderline a cappella, and it's talking about his love for his wife, Polly Sampson, and this is the only song on the album where the lyrics are solely credited to David Gilmour. And, you know, it's some of his best work in the lyrical department. You know, Sorrow's pretty damn good. It's so good. You know, it, you know, has an acoustic guitar solo as well. Normally they're electric, but no, it's an acoustic guitar solo. And, you know, it's fantastic. I, again, cannot stress, you know, how much I love this album. And then that transitions into Keep Talking, which begins with these very, very strange sounds. I believe they are keyboard notes, which are reversed. You know, and it has a sample of, you know, Stephen Hawking. And it's, once again, talking about a failure to communicate, you know, and a little bit of that state of depression. Yeah, you know, and there's, you know, it's kind of a little bit of a call and response thing, but I don't, that's the closest thing I could equate it to. It's kind of like a duet between David Gilmour and the woman singers on this. But again, you know, fantastic. You know, fantastic. You know, and it's, you know, it's got one of Rick's best keyboard solos. Like, definitely his best since Wish You Were Here. You know, if not Dark Side. But it's so good. It's so good. You know, and part of why this album sounds, you know, more like Pink Floyd than Momentary Lapse of Reason is because the Floyd cracked open their old keyboard gear for the first time in a while, and it was programmed into the system. And, you know, they used these, you know, 20, 25-year-old keyboards, and everything and it sounds great. It sounds like Pink Floyd. And it's great. And then Keep Talking translates into What Lost for Words, which is definitely about Roger, the breakdown of a relationship. You know, and you tell me to please go and fuck myself. You know you just can't win. And it's got another great guitar solo, acoustic guitar solo. And then, you know, it ends with the ringing of bells. And in we go to what was, for 20 years, the final Pink Floyd song, High Hopes. And it begins with bells ringing, and then Rick plays a little piano riff. And, you know, it's, you know, it loops back to some of David Gilmour's earliest themes of, you know, nostalgia. It's almost a revisit, lyrically, of Great Gig in the Sky. But, you know, at the same time, it's definitely not a retread, you know, and it's talking about him being a young boy leaving Cambridge, but it could also be equated to the Floyd's journey as a whole. And I'm going to insert a personal story here. I graduated high school a couple months ago, as of the recording of this video. I graduated in May of 2024. Now, I participated in the musical that my school put on, my last 2 years of being there. And when I got home at the end of the final day, stage had been taken down and we'd all been at Red Robin for a good 2.5 hours. I got home and I put in this album. And it was like, hey, that's pretty much the last thing you'll enjoy. That's pretty much the last experience you'll enjoy from high school. High school is all but over because I had, a month and a half to go. And I teared up a little bit, especially, in the last two lines. The endless river, dum dum dum, forever and ever. Again, adds to that air of finality, because that's a reference to See Emily Play. Float on a river forever and ever. And then Dave plays this glorious solo. What was, once again, for 20 years, the final guitar solo on a Pink Floyd studio album. And once again, it adds to that air of finality. And it's so good. It's so good. And then there's a hidden track called Charlie, which was made to, grant a request from the band's manager, Steve O'Rourke, going like, hey, I've always wanted to be on a Floyd album. Can we do that? So it's Steve O'Rourke answering, it's a low fidelity recording, but it's Steve O'Rourke answering a question from Pauly Sampson's kid, Charlie. And then the phone hangs up and he goes, oh, great. And then that's the end of the album. Go buy it. Go buy it. It's so good. I cannot stress how fucking good it is. Go buy it. Don't just listen to it. Go buy it. It's like, over an hour long. It doesn't feel it. It's so good. And of course, the Floyd would once again do a tour for this album. And it led to the greatest live album of all time, which we will be looking at next time. Thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like on it. If you have something to add, please do so in the comment section below. If you would like to continue along this musical journey with me, we've still got a bit to go. Please feel free to subscribe. If you want to hear me talk about something other than music, I have a podcast. It's called Dorkies. I host it with two of my buddies. And if you want to hear what I happen to be listening to that day, you can follow me on Instagram at Sean_Heaster1979. I post a 15-second segment of a song there every single day. And with that, I would like to thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one, which will be Pulse. Oh yeah.